Hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Lucy and I'm your host for today. So these webinars run on a monthly basis. You can go back on our website and check what other topics we've covered and refresh your memory. So I'm joined by Nick Rose today, and the topic of our webinar is Nick Rose from customer to colleague. So Nick used to work at Travis Perkins and he now works at Enable. And we're going to be running through a little bit of background on Nick. Nick's role at Travis Perkins and how you were close to the rebates and the challenges you kind of faced and the benefits of implementing a rebate management system and any advice. So hello Nick and welcome.
Hi Lucy, thanks.
Thanks for coming in and having a chat with me today.
That's right.
And if you've got any questions for Nick or myself, please use the Q&A to ask away and we'll hopefully get those answered. So Nick, let's begin. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background at TP.
Okay, so I started after university. I went to train as an accountant with Ernst & Young in London and did that for a couple of years. Good fun it was. And then in 2003 I joined Travis Perkins, joined into the acquisitions team, so literally buying businesses up and down the country with the aim of filling blank spots on the map where TP didn't have a branch. And extending the channels into different brands and different parts of the market as well. Business improvement projects. And then I had a spell as operations and finance director of Tile Giant, which is one of the smaller businesses in the TP group, about 100 tile stores. And that was good, good place to learn, and great fun. And then I had a spell as finance director of the Travis Perkins brand itself, which is a whole different scale. It's the largest part of the group in terms of number of people, sales and profit. And then I had my last sort of 2 or 3 years there were on business change projects, programs, system implementations, in conjunction with changes in process and ways of working and that sort of thing. So, and that's why I'm here today. So, one of those change programs obviously was DealTrack and the choice of DealTrack and the implementation of it into the group for rebates across all the brands. And I met Enable and Andrew as the MD back then, and then got the opportunity to make a step and join as finance director about 3 months ago now, so back in the summer.
Yeah, and welcome. I hope you're having a great time.
It's brilliant so far, yeah.
Good stuff. We'll come on to that later. But so I want to know a little bit about what you had to do with rebates at Travis Perkins and why they were important.
Yeah, so rebates at TP are very, very important to profitability. There's over £1 billion of supplier income that comes into the group via the rebates process. So getting them right is obviously really, really important. Just wrong by 1% is £10 million. So, you know, there's a big number there. And I first came into rebates sort of territory as FD of Travis Perkins brand, where you have a lot of rebate income, a lot of supplier income. Those deals are often fantastically complicated, and getting those accurate calculations is a real pain, really difficult to do, in particular in the climate of TP where the system was never designed to work with rebates. So a lot of stuff was done outside of system on Excel spreadsheets, basically.
So let's touch a little bit more on those challenges. So they were managed on Excel spreadsheets outside the system. What other kind of challenges were there at
So one of the big reasons that the number in terms of the value of rebates is so high was there was a concept called guaranteed rebate, which effectively was an extra mask on the true price of product, so that the salespeople in branches, great salespeople that they are, the fear was that if they knew the true cost, then pricing would dive down towards it and profitability would be eroded. So a big chunk of it was guaranteed rebate. There's the kind of targeted rebate that fits on top of that. That is a growing part, and that's really what rebates are supposed to be for. You sell more of those, we'll give you more money back. That's the sort of traditional definition. But over years, across 1,000 suppliers and many lines of deals within, the complexity was huge. So challenges involved were all the way through from calculation and money, collecting the money, actually understanding the deal and making it translatable into either the system or the spreadsheets that you were working from, and then taking that enormous volume of data and trying to manipulate it in such a way that you could actually get line of sight by product, by branch, by supplier, try and get to a customer profitability. Very difficult to do when you don't have clarity of what your net margin is.
So a variety of problems then.
Yeah.
And what was the compelling event that made you think, I really need to do something about my rebates?
So the key bit was being able to explain movements in rebates to branches. The operators were quite rightly saying we need to trust the figures that are coming through, and without that trust and credibility, it's really hard to operate a business. Yeah. We had a new CFO join, and chatting to him about, can we really explain our margin? Do we know true net cost? Are we able to get down to real customer, supplier, product, branch profitability? And because of the way rebates were calculated, it's very difficult to do that with any accuracy at the nth degree of detail. And so that trust and credibility was the biggest part of it. The second, I suppose, equally important, but probably not quite as a major driver, was the Tesco Fraud happened back in a few years ago. And I quickly found myself, because I was managing the rebate team amongst some other things at the time, found myself in front of the audit committee explaining why our view was that it couldn't happen at TP. And while we were pretty confident TP had some good, robust procedures in place to prevent what happened at Tesco, the whole, can we explain our margin and do we have real control over everything, came out. And the system that TP was using was very much in the bucket of not fit for purpose. It couldn't handle the deals that it was being asked to handle from a complexity and functionality point of view. It was unwieldy, difficult to handle, and as a result, a lot of rebate calculation was being done on spreadsheets. And Excel can't cope with the types of volumes of data and the complexity of the calculations that it was being asked to do. So the view very much was, needs something to dramatically change in the system side of things, which will help people work around those issues. Could have chosen to build it in-house. That was quickly ruled out because we'd have been building more functionality on a very antiquated, difficult to handle system that TP uses. So the decision was made to go out and find a supplier to work with, to find either who's got a system already or to work with to develop something that we can use.
So in your research, you came across Enable?
Came across Enable. They had some good credentials already, so actually had done work, although not with the full-blown deal track product, with some of TP's competitors. So that kind of gets the name on the table. We found a couple of other options, none of which had a system developed in enough detail or enough functionality that would hit anything like what TP needed. So what we ended up doing was talking to Enable about, let's do a little bit of a deep dive into what's required. Could Enable actually work with us to support the resolution of all those issues and add to the product that was emerging out of Enable called Deal Track, add functionality to it to actually do what TP needed it to do. So there was 3 weeks of pretty intensive fact finding and pondering and soul searching and all of that how do we make this actually work, and should we be doing this? Long story short, the proposal was made, and it was pretty compelling in terms of business case. When you've got £1 billion of income, it doesn't need a lot to make it pretty worthwhile. So from a value point, and also a la Tesco, from a very much a controls point, we designed that system and spent about 1.5 years working with Enable to develop the extra functionality that was needed. Once we'd done the selection and the negotiations and everything else, so that was pretty collaborative way of working.
No, well, that's great stuff. That's great to hear. So, what tasks were done before you had Deal Track?
So, obviously, I've said already, a lot of work through Excel. There were several human error horror stories that Excel can bring. So,
yeah, there are a few out there.
The data volume was so big, for example, that they had 3 or 4 spreadsheets to piece together, and there was one result that came out that looked really weird, and we realised someone had taken a whole load of data from over there, done what they do every month, pasted it into another spreadsheet, but they pasted it in a line 2 lowdown.
Oh, gosh.
And those things just, they frustrate the operators. They make you look like in finance you don't know what you're doing, and it's just human error, and you can't cope with that in a reputable PLC. You need a better way of doing it. So what else were they doing? I've said the fact that trading agreements were hard coded and written on bits of paper. The finance team were generating the accruals manually out of Excel spreadsheets and translating them into a way to post into the system, which again was clunky. And really the biggest kind of bugbear, I suppose, was the 5 times a year rebate realignment phenomenon, whereby you could be coasting along, you've accrued in the management accounts of a particular branch at one level, the manager knows where they are, and then all of a sudden you realise that they've been buying differently to what the system said they had. There might be different rates of rebate in stock, different levels of rebate earned, and all of a sudden there's a huge adjustment goes through in their accounts. You come back to the complexity and the volume of data. There was no way on earth the rebate team could actually explain what had gone on. So trust and credibility became the key words. What do we need out of this? Well, we need the operators and the commercial teams to trust what finance are calculating, and at the moment they don't. So that was the real key part. So you trust your figures.
Yeah,
you can make better business decisions off the back of them.
Yeah,
it is genuinely as simple as that.
Yeah. And what benefits did you see by implementing a rebate management system?
So the key one really revolves around accuracy, transparency of figures, ability to take a query from a commercial or an operator and track back and say, let me track back a sec. So there's always going to be a phenomenon called rebate realignments. So in the world of where you have threshold deals and things like that. So if you're aiming for threshold number 2 and you suddenly have a good year, you're going to hit number 3, or a bad year on that product, you're going to hit number 1. You're always going to have a realignment stage. There's also within Travis Perkins, there's when you have a realignment calculation, you look back at the purchase invoices very carefully, and you say actually some of those purchase invoices were made from non-rebatable suppliers or from a different supplier with a different rebate rate, and that's always going to cause changes through the year. Let's say you had some stock damaged and written off, and it was written off at stock take. Well, you need to catch that up in the rebate rate as well. So the kind of explanation of any changes in the rebate a branch or a business had accrued became all the more transparent. You could get into the nitty-gritty of what's happened where and why. And so when you translate that into trust and credibility of the figures, you can then take the next step into, okay, the sales guys and the operators really trust the figures behind them, they can make better business decisions, better trading, and they can move forward on that basis with confidence that they're making the right decision for the business, rather than unwittingly entering into a low margin sale and that sort of thing. So trust and credibility, massive benefit, and the audit trail, like I've said, is really key as well.
Yeah. And did anything surprise you?
In DealTrack itself,
with using a rebate management system.
Yeah. So the big thing was actual ease of use. So bear in mind the history in TP is the last 35 years have been on a keyboard based green screen. There is no mouse to use on the main system that they operate in TP. What you get with DealTrack is a modern experience. It's pretty intuitive. I went in, used it, had no one telling me what to do, and I could find everything I needed to find just to look at. The commercial teams had a bit of training, a couple of hours. That was it. They went off and negotiated their deals on it, and there were some superstar users around the place to help people. But the user experience, the ease of use, and the kind of rate it was adopted in both commercial and finance teams was really a very pleasant surprise, because you hear horror stories of systems being great and then actually not being adopted well because they're not rolled out and trained properly. Well, the training needs were pretty low, so it was very easy to adopt from a user perspective. The other bit, I suppose, was it helped you negotiate better deals, and it helps you negotiate with clarity in terms of what you're doing. There's a function in there called executive summary, which allows you to play around with the deal and say, well, if we changed or tweaked it in this way and had sales of this amount, that's what the rebate would be. And that helps you plan forward, work out where to put your purchases, and that's a real commercial benefit that we thought there'd be some there in terms of TP, but it has really helped.
Oh, that's really good to know. Thank you very much. So what advice would you give to our audience members if they were considering implementing a new system?
Well, all system implementations should have a couple of things, and the number one is to have buy-in at the executive level. If you don't have that, then it won't get off the ground. Plan it properly, but the businesses should always put someone with the right level of knowledge and the right level of empowerment into that program full time, or at least make it a big objective of that person to land this project. And by empowerment, that means empowerment across all the functions that are needed to be able to land the system change. Because with a system change goes a change in the way of working. And you find lots of people embrace that really quickly. Others will go slower and say, oh, I really like this system that I'm really safe using. I've used it for years. I know where I am. Change sounds scary. So there's all the whole continuum of change. Different people react in different ways. And putting the right person involved into leading that project is really critical. And in TP, I would say I was very lucky. I had 3 people full-time on the project who were brilliant. And you've got to really choose them carefully. They were great people. I think when you're changing a system, you will, like I say, look at ways of working, and it all goes into be adaptable to change. You might want to change a system to fit whatever process you've got today, but there's a reason the system might have been set up in that way. So be adaptable and flexible. Think about changing your business process to fit the system. Because as soon as you start customizing systems, you're on a pretty dodgy road there, and it can get difficult to maintain it in the future when you're not kind of core product. You've got an extension just for you or whatever. So, and I suppose when it comes to the type of system we implement with DealTrack, what data are you going to get? What data are you going to put into it? Make sure you can access that data, and you can set up the data feeds in such a way that's going to suit your business. The regularity of those feeds needs to be where it should be, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly. DealTrack doesn't need a live feed, which is helpful because live integrations are really tricky to set up. But the more often data goes into it, the more quickly you'll get results and insight and understanding. So
that's great. Thanks very much, Nick. So you recently worked at Travis Perkins and now you work at Enable. What attracted you to working at Enable?
So obviously I know the product pretty well from days at TP. And look, for me, I've been in a big corporate place for a long time, and this is a chance for me personally to do something really different. It's a very exciting company. I really believe in the product. Having not just bought it but implemented it and seen it working, I truly know it can transform the way a business operates in terms of its rebate and supply trading setup, and customer setup for that matter as well, because obviously TP still has rebates going to customers. It is almost as simple as changing the sign in front, and you can use it for customer rebates as well. So I think it's a great product. I think the strategy in terms of growth and being product led is really interesting. But more than that as well, the culture at Enable is absolutely fantastic. So I was staggered when I turned up on the first day, and I was like, where do we get lunch? Oh, it's in the fridge. Everyone gets lunch bought for them every day, and those little things really drive a team forward, and I think they make the culture and the environment and the feel of the team at Enable a really fantastic one. So that's been a very nice kind of landing. The team spirit's great. We're growing. It's always nice to be in a growing environment. So yeah, it's been pretty
great.
good.
Well, I'm glad you enjoy it.
That's good.
So just to conclude, Nick used to work at Travis Perkins in lots of various different roles, and you kind of on the front line, as I keep saying, of the rebates. And you've talked about the challenges such as the volume of spreadsheets you used to have and the lack of clarity and the visibility with managing those rebates on Excel, and the kind of the fears of after the Tesco fraud case, and the kind of those fears were quite present at the time.
Yeah. And
he's given us some advice. So if you are considering implementing a new rebate management system, you need an expert project lead. You need to consider the data, and you need to be adaptable to change. And not all products are going to fit with your business process, but actually a product could come in and help improve that process you already have. So now we're going to go to our Q&A and see what questions people have asked.
Yeah, throw some tough ones in, hopefully.
Okay. So Nick, we've had a few questions come in while we've been chatting, and our first question from our audience member is, how were you supported once you purchased the software?
So onboarding. Well, Enable had a onboarding team, worked pretty closely with the IT team predominantly within TP. It was a couple of weeks of data manipulation. There's an awful lot of data testing that went before any live run. And then what we did at TP, we had a dual running, so old system and new system running for in parallel, and that enabled Travis Perkins to compare the results, and that's useful obviously because it gives you a bit more security that something's not going to change massively as soon as you just switch. And actually the results came out much more understandable. Where there were differences, DealTrack was always right.
Yeah,
I would say that now, but it genuinely was. So the support was absolutely there. I don't recall any conversations of kind of where are they in terms of support and making sure that the paperwork and the kind of contractual stuff was all done properly as well. So in and around him onboarding, there's obviously the escrow stuff for the code. There's the help desk as well, which is ongoing, and so I think that the team feels pretty well supported.
No, that's great. That's
since
really good.
onboarding as well. So
That's really good to know. And so we've talked about the ease of use of the software, and your team found it relatively easy to use. So how much training did they receive? And did they find it easy, the training?
So there's two different types of team really involved, so finance and commercial. The finance team had fairly in-depth training because obviously there's a lot to do around accruals and calculations and learning all that, but actually the training materials are all there, so it wasn't a difficult training, it was just a little bit longer, probably a good couple of days each. And the project team were finance people, two of them as well, so they went and actually sat with the finance team responsible for running the rebates and running the system after implementation. So that was really helpful. The commercial team, there were some super users who got a fairly in-depth piece of training, and then most users got an hour, 2 hours of this is what you need to do. The senior guys who just have to go in and sign off deals had an intro, had an hour or two of what the system is, what it does. This is what's expected of you in terms of signing off. And if you log in with your email address, that's your signature. And it was pretty straightforward. All the material was there, and it's a modern themed way of working. So
no, it's really good. And we have one final question from our audience. So TP is a bigger merchant. As a smaller merchant, would I see the same sort of benefits?
So one of the key issues for TP was sheer volume of data, and so obviously if you're smaller, then it stands to reason that's not such a huge benefit, but that's kind of the headline piece. The benefits around audit control and structure and security are absolutely there, and they're the same for any size of business, as are the ability to use DealTrack to decide how to negotiate what on next year's deals and what lines to add to in-year targets and things like that, and using the prompt system to say, spend another 50,000 on that supplier, you'll get 20,000 back in rebate, so it might be a 40% return, that sort of thing. That's relevant at any size. So I think it's there's a couple of extra benefits for the really big customers, but the benefits are there from all levels, really.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much. Well, we're actually now out of time, but if you do have questions, we will get back to you and get those answered. So I just want to thank you, Nick, for coming in today.
No problem. Pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for watching, and make sure you tune in and sign up for our next webinar next month, and follow us on social media such as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.